hello, Europeans, more taxes are coming.
A political revolution is necessary.
If this thing that we call European Union is not working, then we don't need it.
Do you think, Antonios, we are in a cultural war with the United States? Episode number 5 goes live, and we are starting as usual with the comments. Antonios, which comment should we take on first?
I think, well, let's take first the comment from Depra92. So what you discuss in this episode hits a point almost never highlighted. Europe has a tempo problem. We cooperate well in some regions, but we move too slowly in logistics, regulation, and even industrial correction. If the EU wants citizens to engage, the system has to respond in human time, not bureaucratic time. Curious to see how you imagine making that shift concrete in one policy area first. Okay, so Debra, thank you very much for the comment. The first thing that I have to say is that it is an accurate description of reality. This is what happens. We know that for many years that the decision-making on the European level takes a lot of time, and this is absolutely understandable under the current circumstances. We have a very complex policy-making landscape. We have the Commission, the Parliament, the Council, 27 member states, 23 different languages, so all this necessarily takes time.
I'm sorry to interrupt, but what people also don't realize, each of these institutions has a separate digital system where it communicates. So, for example, the Council has its own separate internet where documents are stored. The Commission has its own, the Parliament has its own. So even, the daily exchange of information is difficult for those people inside.
Yeah, absolutely. I guess this happens also on the national level with state bureaucracies.
Which is another complication. Which is another complication to the system.
Which is another complication, absolutely. And this system was created, as I said many times, for a completely different world. That, time was not of the essence. We had to make changes incrementally, slowly, think carefully about it, because there was no urgency. There were no existential problems.
It's clearly not possible to innovate and deregulate or regulate again one specific policy at a time within the European reality right now. For once, there is a combination of interconnections between policy areas. So that's why the European Commission is working right now on the deregulation with omnibus packages, because too much is just connected. The second thing, now we are not witnessing a political clash of those who are for Europe and against Europe as a united union of nation states. We rather see a clash of those who feel comfortable with the status quo and would like to continue just shaping the continent as they had for years, and those who really feel that a reform is needed. And I think this is not always connected to which party you are from. It's probably a mindset thing, and across both Eurosceptic and pro-European central liberal parties, you have those who are very much reform-oriented and those who are struggling to understand that this is the only way to go. So that's I think also another point that should be taken into account, that we are in a very dynamically changing environment. Addressing one policy at a time is just not going to work, and it's not something we actually should be aiming at. But there is a waking up realization that a political revolution is necessary.
Well, I like that. Political revolution is necessary. Here's my take on the comment. It is a very accurate description of reality. The system is very slow. We know that. Everybody knows that. And the only way forward is to sit together, basically agree on which topics not one topic specifically, but which topics we're going to have common decisions, and those are going to be the topics that need urgent action, proactive action on the European level. And then the rest of the decisions need to be taken on the national state level. So it's a double, let's say a parallel reform of the decision-making process. More European decision-making powers for the things that matter, and more national sovereignty on the things that can be solved on the national level. And this will create a nice balance between, creating more, in both cases, creating faster decisions to tackle the challenges that we have.
And actually here, I think it's a good moment to also highlight another comment on our most recent episode from Grażyna Beżowa, who, and I have to say, I appreciate that the comments we get are becoming longer, not just one sentence comment, actual opinions, which I very much appreciate. I would like to say that to anyone planning to comment on this video. Please take your time and just share your opinion. So Grażyna says that she really appreciates this video because we explain something many of people feel but cannot describe so clearly. The EU is making more and more regulations, but nobody stops to check if these rules actually help out companies. And of course, she says she was shocked that to hear that Allegro, that's the company we mentioned, spends 30% of their IT stack, tech stack, on compliance, which is shocking. And in her work, Grażyna says she also spends too much time trying to understand new requirements instead of building real innovation. And the thing is that what this comment actually highlights, in my perspective, is that the political debate for so long has been detached from real problems. We have been, because what people understand about politics is what they hear from what politicians are discussing and putting forward. The problems that politicians are pointing to, that, oh, this is what we should focus on, this is what will make our society better. Well, I think we're in a time where voters and citizens cannot anymore take the public debate as it is, for as that this is the right way to shape it. We should be more critical.
Again, this is one of the things that we've known for years, if not decade or so, that the voters are detached from the political class. It's like they cannot speak to the problems. It's like, to put it very simply, they don't understand what the real problem is. And in our case, in Europe, the real problem, also to link back to the comment, is the fact that we don't have any real innovation, and then when we do have real innovation, it is difficult to scale this innovation or to create a business case out of this innovation. We have patents, we have new technologies, technological advancements taking place on European soil, but then what happens is that in order to take this innovation and put it in the real world, you have to leave Europe, basically. This is exactly what the startup community is saying. They're not just saying, shouting for years now, that if they want to scale their business after they've innovated a software or a service or a technological advancement in manufacturing, they have to go to the United States or somewhere else in order to be able to scale this. So that's an example of, this is what the startup community is saying, and the political class does not see it.
We will speak about the startup community, but before we do that, because it's connected to a couple of topics I noted down to talk today about. But before we do that, there is a heavy industry-related comment from Eagle Feather 777, who said, Europe isn't going anywhere until they get rid of the EU and exploit the fossil fuels that they have. Sorry, wind and solar can't drive heavy machinery. I have a couple of problems with this comment. I mean, I appreciate the comment because it gives us the opportunity to actually say something that is important. And first of all, getting rid of the EU is not going to happen because it's a agreed structure of collaboration of the European countries. And unless the nations of Europe decide that, then, well, and if you want to advocate for a change, then say that someone should change the priorities of the EU. And that could be to focus on exploiting fossil fuels. Great. But there is another problem with this. For example, in Poland, my home country, the government subsidizes the coal mining industry with over 2 billion euros each year. Because otherwise, the industry would just fall apart. Because the coal that is mined in Poland is not meeting the quality standards and the price standards of the free market. So, well, we have the coal, but so what? And in terms of
Everybody gets
solar,
subsidies, though. Everybody gets subsidies. Fossil fuels, wind, solar, everybody gets subsidies. In Europe, at least.
that's another thing. So, and there's also another issue that is visible right now, especially in Ukraine. If you look at, Ukraine, despite the war going on, they keep building out solar and wind energy. Why? Because actually a wind farm is way more secure and reliable and resistant to attacks than a traditional plant. Because if you hit a big industrial building, the building is gone. If you hit one windmill, the others can still function. And last comment, we are facing a big demand for electrification in Europe. So the amount of electricity that will be required in the future will not be met unless we build out everything we can. Solar, wind, nuclear. The numbers we are looking at for the future need of energy are just from another level of requirements. And this is the same situation is happening in the United States. If you look at the data centers that are planning to be built within the next years, it's already clear that 40% of the required electricity demand is not possible to be met.
We're living in the age of electricity, for sure. The demand for electrons is huge and is going to get bigger, absolutely. But the comment has, in my view, two parts. The second one is the energy question. So I'll answer first or make a comment first on this one. The energy question, I think definitely we need a better energy policy in Europe because we have the most expensive energy compared to everywhere else in the world. And you cannot be competitive. You cannot have an industry, a manufacturing capacity or a digital capacity if you have these or even the people to heat up their homes, and we're not talking only about the industry. This is not sustainable. The energy prices in Europe are not sustainable.
And it's killing small business.
For small business, people, industries, everyone is paying a huge price. Everybody's talking about wind and solar, but we need an electricity grid that we don't have at the moment. And in order to develop the electricity grid, it needs billions and hundreds of billions of euros in investments. Who is going to pay for that price? Again, it's going to be the consumers who are paying it, driving the energy prices higher than they already are. So it doesn't make any sense to just pick a technology. We have to be technology neutral. We open up the space and we say, look, there's a market, there's a regulatory environment that facilitates competition between the different sources. Let's have it. Let's unleash, free up the innovation forces on the continent, whether it is on wind and solar and renewables, whether it is on fossil fuels, whether it is on nuclear and other sources that are currently in development and research. And let's have a reasonable, logical mix of energy sources and vectors. This is the only way that any dramatic change on the prices of energy is going to happen in the next few years. And then that would be my take on the second part of the comment. The first part of the comment, I can appreciate the content. I told you before, I told everyone before, if this thing that we call European Union is not working and it's not effective, and by effective, I mean to benefit the people, the member states, and the European economy, then we don't need it. It's very logical. It's
Yes, but
absolutely reasonable.
listen, what I don't agree with is this narrative that is still living in people's heads, that the EU is an enemy. The EU is not an enemy. It's a system we agreed to participate in, and now it's not working the way it's supposed to.
Look,
But
I'll respond very quickly on this comment as a objective political scientist. Every time there is a dramatic change in regulation, there are winners and losers. We know that. The literature knows that. Okay? Every time there is a change on the policy on the European level, someone wins and someone loses. It is absolutely normal and natural for the people who are losing because of certain decisions on the European level to feel that the decision-making process is hostile to their interests. Okay, so this is the objective way to look at it. The question is whether this thing that we have created on the European level can actually benefit the vast majority of the people. And this is the justification for any kind of political entity, whether it is a nation state, whether it is a regional or a local authority. The benchmark for its existence is that it serves the people. It's a very liberal way of looking at this.
Antonios. Yeah, but there's another question which is also even probably more important. If we decide as a society, we vote in a way that brings us to a point that abolishes the European Union or cancels the agreements, what's the alternative? What's better or what's different that we actually would like to have instead of the current system? Because that's where it all would be leading to, right? To have something else.
That's what I keep saying. I keep saying to all the policymakers here in Brussels that this argument is not going to work for long. The argument of there is no alternative is not going to convince people. In the end, if people are having difficulties and hardships in their everyday life, at some point they will say, screw it. I don't care. This is not working for me, so I don't care what's coming afterwards. You know, there's always this there is a turning point in every justification or argument that it doesn't convince people anymore. We want a European Union that provides security for the member states and for the people. Do we have one? No. We want a European Union that is actually facilitating the economic growth of all the member states and raising the living conditions of the people. Do we have that? It is questionable, right? We have the least economic growth compared to all the other regions of the world right now as we speak, and there is plenty of data on this. We want a European Union that safeguards peace and stability on the continent. Do we have that? No, we have a war in our neighborhood. We had until recently, and we will have again, a war in the Middle East. It's our neighborhood. We have all sorts of instabilities all over the place. Where is the European Union in this? Where are the member states in this? And this is exactly what I would like to say as a final comment. Even if you get rid of the EU as it is right now, completely, let's take the most crazy scenario that this whole thing is cancelled. What remains, and this is my biggest, the biggest disagreement I have also with the Eurosceptics. What remains is also ineffective. What remains is also impossible for the nation states to defend their interests, to provide security, to create the economic conditions for growth. So the alternative is equally bad. And in my point of view, what we need to do is to think forward, not backward. Let's not go back to the 20th and the 19th century. It's a completely different world. We have to go forward. And this means that we have to actually create a union, or whatever it is called. We actually have to create a union that serves the interest of the people and the nations of Europe.
Sounds like unimaginable challenge, to be honest.
But it's not.
That's what scares me most.
I'll tell you. And then we can close the comment section. There has always been, I like these historical perspectives, there is a way to look at the European history as a constant tension between fragmentation, division, and unity. The European Union is not the first time that we have tried to manage this fragmentation and division that there exists in the continent. In other words, the EU is not the first time that we have tried not to fight with each other. And whenever there are plenty of other historical examples of how Europeans try to manage the hostilities, the differences, their different interests with each other. But what I can say for sure is that every time the efforts to manage this fragmentation and division collapsed, it was a horrible period for Europe. So instead of just trying to going back to a complete fragmentation of the continent, we should strive to go to a future where the common institutions that we have created are actually working.
Okay, so maybe there is something we can discuss that actually brings us together. I would like to, let's maybe start with a question. Do you think, Antonios, we are in a cultural war with the United States?
Absolutely not. We are more Americans than we would like to admit, and they are more Europeans than they would like to admit.
Well, with that I agree, because to put it also in the historical context, what the United States are right now today, their culture has been shaped by former Europeans. And I think everyone will agree that we feel there is a lot of connections and common ground. But over the weekend, we saw a really big outrage of emotions that came after the Commission announced this 120 million fine on X for not following some of the Commission's requests. I was reflecting on why we have such a hard way to communicate about free speech, about the freedom to express yourself. But then I realized that between the US and Europe, there is actually a significant difference in how we approach the freedom of expression. Because in the United States, the right of freedom of expression that is guaranteed by the Constitution is almost an absolute shield, against the government. You can say anything you want, and nobody can touch you. In Europe, we have a very different set of rules. So, for example, the constitution of my country, Poland, guarantees you freedom of expression. It's, I think, Article 54. But on the other hand, the law prohibits you to use hate speech. The law prohibits you to deny the Holocaust, and the law prohibits you to spread publicly lies about other people. And it's punishable by law, and people are actually getting punished with fines and jailed for that if it's necessary.
All those differences that you claim weren't so strong and problematic 20 years ago or 30 years ago. We were more aligned, let's say, because we didn't have the new information communications technologies and all these new digital platforms and social media and so on. So this difference, it's just a matter of difference of how we approach the new digital platforms and the social media and the new way of communication.
Yeah, but that's the value, the underlying values and how they differ. I think they didn't
again
change.
or January 2025, before the election of Trump, those differences were not great either. So we had the same inclination to censor also in the United States. I mean, Trump himself was censored. He was kicked out of platforms like Twitter and so on. Okay, so I don't see any major
but you can argue,
differences there.
you can argue that he was kicked out against what the United States Constitution says, because if you have
that was a huge discussion, and still is, if that is true or not. Okay, so I'm not taking sides. I'm not taking sides in that. I'm just pointing out.
Well, I'm also not. Yeah.
I'm just pointing out that a few months ago, all these differences that people claim that now is a cultural warfare were not so big, or they were not big enough to claim something like this. And something that completely discredits the cultural war clash between United States and Europe is that there is a very large and significant political force domain in Europe that actually agrees with what the Americans are saying about Europe. So it's not like we have two completely different blocks. We have political dynamics in the public sphere in both the United States and the European Union. And it's normal in a democracy to have political friction and tension between different sides of the political spectrum. I don't see anything bad with that, objectively speaking.
What I enjoyed is that people from Europe were calling out Elon Musk, not for, the critique, because maybe the critique is justified or not, but what they called him out is for his interference in EU matters. Because if we don't like our institutions, it's up to us to change them. But if you're an American, no, but that was the feeling of the discussion I had, and
we have freedom of speech. Anyone can say anything about whatever, huh? And I laugh whenever Europeans speak about interference. If you think about the previous US election, the level of interference from Europe was much higher.
But it was also not okay, right?
The same.
Or should we normalize that? I mean,
of course, we need to normalize that. We have an open society. We have an open democracy. We can, if you don't like Trump, you can go out and say it. If you don't like Musk, you can go out and say it. And if Musk doesn't like the EU, I don't care. But he's free to say whatever he wants.
So you think it's okay if I, being a European, go to United States and criticize their government?
Absolutely.
And call for a change of government?
Absolutely. Why not?
Okay, but I know that the Americans would not appreciate it.
That's their right as well. and you take your risks. if
Oh, I
the
think
current
you're in the
administration
corner
doesn't
now.
like it.
I
Well,
cornered you now. Come on.
no, there's no reason to stop that in our day and age, and especially between us. We criticize each other all the time, and we criticize other regions of the world every time. I don't see why we cannot do the
Yeah, I mean, I
same.
know, but there is a difference between criticizing and having a grown-ups debate and actually, just, what Elon Musk does. He got a fine for not following, rules in a foreign region that he doesn't like. He doesn't like the rules. He doesn't like the government. But the way he reacted, the way he was tried to bully European politicians with his communication, the way that he actually cancelled the advertising account of the European Commission on X, it's just childish. And it's not helping him to be listened to, actually. That's my point.
Well, again, there's a big portion of Europeans who doesn't like the same rules. And I have lots of criticism about the same digital rules.
Well, I know you hate them.
They are stifling innovation. They are good. They are bad. They are absolutely bad for European business everywhere. But they are. I mean, at some point, I believe that the European Commission or whatever the European decision maker said, okay, we cannot compete with the Europeans or the Chinese when it comes to innovating and creating stuff and building stuff. So what are we going to do? We are going to regulate. That's something that we can do. The
And we spoke
US,
about it on the last episode. They basically, you said it, they regulated something they have no idea about.
yeah.
And they keep doing it. They keep approaching regulation of things that Europe is not even building.
But listen,
like AI.
They think that this is going to bring the American digital big tech giants under control.
Underneath.
Yeah, under
Yes.
control. But
No.
what in reality happens is that it kills the digital ecosystem in Europe. And for some of them, it's okay. I've talked with some policymakers who said we have to make the necessary sacrifices in order to be able to control the European big tech. The spectrum on the left is absolutely fine with this argument. They want more control and they are ready to make the sacrifices. But the digital sphere, the digital ecosystem is so interconnected that if you try, you cannot isolate, let's say, the American or the Chinese companies, especially when all the European companies are using the infrastructure, the technologies, the software that is coming from US companies. So if you hurt the US companies, you are hurting yourself. And that's another motive, a light motive of the European politics these past years, that we're okay with hurting ourselves in order to reaffirm our values or save the environment or save the planet or whatever. So it's always, we have to sacrifice ourselves for the greater good. So I don't believe that how to say this in other ways. If the regulation is meant to create conditions for growth, for interconnections, for interdependence, which is a fundamental aspect of any kind of liberal worldview, I'm all in favor. If it is to hurt the US companies just because we don't like them, or just because we don't like Trump, or just because we are afraid of what is going to happen in the future, then this is wrong. And it really, I can understand why the Americans hate it, because, this is not friendly This is not a friendly regulation. I'm not saying that we don't have to have regulations, mind you, but the regulations need to, as I said, facilitate economic growth, interdependence, cooperation with each other.
Coming back to your previous point about the detachment of citizens from the regulatory and political matrix of the EU and of the politics of the nation states, I spent quite some time reading the national security strategy of the White House. Donald Trump's office, White House, has published a new document that outlines a national security strategy. And I
At
have
least
to
they have
say,
one. We don't.
exactly. And I have to say, I really like the document. Now, hear me out.
Yeah,
I will
that's
read one sentence.
provocative. Yeah, let's hear you out. Yeah.
One thing that I would like to be understood, what is the purpose of the strategy like this? And I just love this sentence. I think it should be put on every politician's monitor in their offices, in their computer. All Americans need to know what exactly it is we are trying to do and why. That's the simple, it's a simple, short document. If you compare this, even the language of it, with the mission letters of the European Commission, with strategic documents that change from year to year, and you have the pre-term mission letters and strategic outline, and then within the year you have another 2 or 3 other documents that are outlining some other level of strategy. Then you have the strategic plan for each year that is published by the European Commission. How can the poor citizen, come on, a strategy? Yeah.
We don't have a strategy. We have a strategic compass. These are two completely different things, no matter what anyone claims. So we're gonna take a lot of shit for this, but yes, as you said, you like the document for the right reasons. It's clear. It communicates to the citizens all the motivations and the intentions in a way that cannot be at least questioned. It's absolutely honest. And this is why I don't understand the outrage in Europe when it comes to the national security strategy of the United States. It's absolutely honest. At least those guys are telling us, this is what we see wrong with the world. And if you focus that on Europe, this is what we see wrong with Europe. This is our forecast. And this is why we are going to act in a certain way. I don't see anything wrong with that. The Europeans, I saw on LinkedIn, on Instagram, on other forums, feeling outraged because of what is written. Actually, there are two things that I have to say. First of all, there is no surprise. They have been consistently saying this on the highest level, the president, the vice president, ambassadors, they have been consistently repeating the same messages again and again for the past year. There's no surprise there.
Even before Trump.
To some extent,
this is not a Trump thing.
To some extent.
And also, what I would like to point out, this is what I've been hearing from a number of analytical sources, think tanks around Europe, actually, that no matter who comes after Trump, things are not going back to where they were.
There's not going to be a dramatic
Trump.
change.
This is not a Trump thing only. This is basically the point of view. This going back from this interventionistic approach is something that has been a rising feeling within the Washington deep state.
Absolutely true. Absolutely true. The Asian pivot. So the US Asian pivot. So the fact that Europe is not the center of attention of US foreign policy goes way back into the past. Started with Obama and Clinton, when Hillary Clinton was um, state secretary, then the propensity, the inclination to do things unilaterally, it also continued not only with Trump, but also with Biden. If someone remembers the outrage of Europeans on that unilateral retraction of US troops from Afghanistan, when the US went out of Afghanistan all by themselves, for example, complete unilateral decision. And this whole idea of redefining our relationships, not to forget the consistent request to increase defense spending, it also goes way back. So this whole logic of redefining the relations, the transatlantic relationship, basically, it's not a Trumpian invention. And it will continue because the world is changing. This is something that we have to understand. And we have to find a new way of working with the Americans. There's no cultural fight here. It's a political fight. Okay? It's a political fight. And the second comment that I had for the national security strategy, again, we cannot claim that that is the American view and we have a completely separate European view. There are plenty of people that are even more critical of Europe, and it's growing. Despite what the political establishment is saying, it is growing. And it's not growing because people are fooled. Well, to some extent, that's also true, but it's not the main reason. It's growing because I'm circling back to the fact that what we have right now, the political class, the political establishment, the institutions that we have on the European level are not effective. So people will start looking for alternatives. And the alternative view can come from outside, not completely outside, because the United States is an inside outsider in Europe. It's not a completely external force. The Americans are not a completely external force in Europe, in the continent, and we know that, okay? We cannot be hypocritical. They have bases in Europe. They have thousands and thousands of troops stationed in Europe. They have companies that have huge commercial interests and manufacturing bases in Europe. They have political connections with Europe. They share same historical trajectories with Europe, and they have every right to talk about Europe. Okay, and if it weren't for the Americans, we wouldn't have common reconstruction policies right after the Second World War. They pushed for European integration as nobody else. These are all historical facts, very well recorded. Okay, they contributed to the European security for 70 years. So they're not complete outsiders. And all this bullshit about cultural war with the United States is just purely hypocritical, as is any kind of outrage whenever an American figure is trying to have an opinion about Europe. But I will give them that. If you really want the Americans out of the continent, well, start acting like it.
That's I think the most valid point here. I want also to, because we speak a lot about soft power on the podcast, and I think it's very interesting to look at one of the very first paragraphs of the strategy, which says that the goal of the United States government is to protect the country, people in its territory, in its economy, and its way of life from military attack, but also hostile foreign influence. And as hostile foreign influence, the strategy defines espionage, which is obviously bad, predatory trade practices, drug and human trafficking, destructive propaganda, and influence operations. And now what I think is I haven't seen this kind of word in any European documents so far. Cultural subversion.
Okay. Yeah. Cultural subversion. This is a very fancy way of saying that we don't need any more people coming to Europe or the United States and criticizing Europe and the United States. We have to recall, at least if we don't remember, that Europe and the United States is the best place in the world to be born at the moment. The level of abundance that we have, the level of freedom, the level of human rights, the level of cultural protection of the individual and the social in Europe and the United States, you cannot find it anywhere in the world. The level of technological advancement historically, not just now, the level of scientific breakthroughs, the level of philosophical attainment concerning the basic human conditions and the basic social principles that should guide the way we live with each other. Everything happened in Europe and the US. So when we have very organized movements of criticizing again and again our history and our current status here in Europe, this is actually, I don't believe that this is a friendly, constructive way of looking at things. There's definitely plenty of dark spots in our history, as is with everybody else in the world. It's the human reality. Okay, there is no place on the planet which is completely innocent and sent and sanctified. No, everybody, because we are all humans, everybody has a little dark corner of history that they would rather forget, let's say. But we cannot completely discredit our achievements, philosophical, scientific, political achievements, because some people just, I don't know, they just don't like us, or they don't like themselves. You know, they are basically self-hating. So I don't believe that this is completely, completely a completely natural movement, let's say. I think there are people who are benefiting from this kind of stuff. So we have to be at least careful, cautious, and mindful of this kind of cultural subversion.
I agree. And also to finish up this topic, I just want to say that it's also very interesting that the strategy points out the need to focus solely on activities within the Western Hemisphere, and also refers to a document from the 19th century, which is the Monroe Doctrine, which refers rather to colonial times, and the U.S. not interfering with European colonies, and Europe not interfering with U.S. colonies, because that was more or less what the Monroe Doctrine was about. But in times we live in, the document defines that the United States expects to be the absolute leader of influence in their hemisphere, in the Western Hemisphere, so both North and South America, and expects no one else to go in their way, which is an important also message to European leaders who are just trying to finalize the EU-Mercosur trade agreement.
I wouldn't take that as a hostile statement. I think that's the baseline scenario. It doesn't mean that we cannot have a free trade agreement with Latin America, or increased cooperation with Canada or whatever. But in order to be also a bit provocative from my side, as if already it wasn't enough, it would be very useful also to have a European Monroe Doctrine as well for our part of the world and for our neighborhood. But this requires us to have more responsibilities that the Europeans just don't want. This is our
Maybe
continent.
maybe this will be the title of the episode. We need a European Monroe Doctrine.
Maybe we can discuss about that after we look at the episode altogether. This is our continent. This is our continent. This is our neighborhood. This is our part of the world. We need to be able to manage instabilities, challenges, threats, and we are controlling this part of the neighborhood. Ideally, we should be able to say that, okay? But we can't. We cannot as we are now, and we will not be able to do it if we go back to the 19th and 20th century division and fragmentation in the European continent.
That's absolutely a very good summary of this part of our episode. But we also promised everyone that we will discuss European taxes, which is an upcoming thing. People, I think, don't realize that the ways the European budget is funded are not only, the money is not only coming from member state contributions. The European Commission is trying to push forward for the new political, the multilateral finance framework for the years 2028, 2035, has proposed 5 new revenue streams that would possibly put in an astonishing number of 58 billion euros per year to the EU budget.
Mhm.
So let's discuss this.
To explain in simple terms, the European Union doesn't have its own budget so far, its own resources so far to fund its own budget. It's all member contributions. So the member states just give money in a common pool of funds for the European Union to fund its own activities, which includes everything. And from that budget, there are some of that money goes back to the member states. Most of the budget goes back to the member states, but there is also funding of European projects or European initiatives, and also the basic costs of running the European bureaucracy. Now something happened.
Research.
And research as well, yeah. Common agricultural policy, so that there are big European initiatives that are funded from the budget. Now, something happened a few years ago during COVID, and that was that for the first time in history, European Union borrowed money from the markets as the EU, not as the member states, but as the EU, and then again gave that money back to the member states either as loans or low interest loans or as grants. And this is where the money that the member states were using for the past 3-4 years is coming from. And the fund is called the Next Generation EU Fund. The member states received,
which now has paid back.
6 billion euros, more or less, have been given by the European Union to the member states through joint borrowing. Now we have the bill coming. So we have to pay that money back.
Nice.
That's the way it works with loans, and if the EU uses the budget that it has to pay for that money, then the budget will be for that loan. The budget will be depleted, and there isn't going to be enough for the rest of the activities, paying the basic cost of European integration, the big European initiatives like the Common Agricultural Policy, research, giving back to the member states as contribution for regional and cohesion funds, you name it. So the plan is to introduce, as they call it, EU own resources, which is basically new taxes if we want to make a comparison with the US, it would be a sort of a federal tax. So the first comment that I'm making is that, hello, Europeans, more taxes are coming. So this is something that in Europe, it seems like it's like, I don't know, it's in our DNA. I don't know where that comes from. Whenever we have a problem, more taxes. That's the universal tool to solve every policy problem. Now, the problem is, the real problem is that we have maxed out the taxes on every single member state, or almost every single member state, with very, very few exceptions. You know, too many taxes, people cannot pay anymore. And it's not the industry. That's a fallacy. It's not the industry or the big companies that are going to pay those taxes. Eventually, those taxes are going to be relayed to the consumers, to the voters, to the people in order to pay. So we will have a new wave of inflation. We will have a new wave of rising prices, and so on and so forth. The second problem with the plan for EU own resources is that if you look at the sources of this taxation, we're looking at what the economists would call diminishing tax bases, which means that if the policies that are being decided are working, then the revenue from these kind of taxes is going to be less. So it's like betting against your own policies, betting against yourself. When, for example, they say that one of the main revenues is going to be the European trade emission trading system, the ETS. It means that right now, every company that is producing a lot of CO2 emissions is going to be taxed. But there is a policy in place for these CO2 emissions to be decreased, eliminated in the future. So what kind of tax is this? If the signal is mixed, you either say that this policy is not going to be very successful, so we will have a lot of years taxing the biggest polluters, or you're saying that basically this is going to be a permanent taxation revenue for the EU, because the emissions is not going to end by 2035 or 40 or 50, whatever is the current arbitrary goal. And the same is true for the rest of the revenue streams. The so-called CBAM, another amazing invention in Europe, which is basically a tariff for important high CO2 emission goods, is basically the same. If the EU succeeds in its mission to lower CO2 emissions everywhere in the world, then again, the revenue from this tax is going to be eliminated. The same goes for e-waste tax. If we have a circular economy with a lot of recycling taking place, then nobody is going to be left to be taxed. The same goes for tax.
But that's a very long shot, fair to say.
Yeah, that's a very long shot, but in other words, it's permanent. That's what I'm saying. It's not a temporary. The policy is not going to work. We are going to be taxing everyone for polluting or not recycling or importing high emission polluting products like aluminum, cement, steel, and so on. And the same goes for excise duties, so taxes on tobacco products. The stated objective here is a public health objective. We are taxing smokers in order for them to stop smoking, which is not working, obviously, because we still have, 80 million people who smoke in Europe alone. So it's hypocritical. You're basically taxing them because they will never stop smoking. So they will pay whatever tax or excise duty you impose on the cigarettes. So again, the whole scheme is completely hypocritical because they don't come out and say, look, this is the reality, this is what we have to do, this is how we are going to do it. They are hiding behind all these lofty goals. We have to stop CO2 emission, we have to save the planet, we have to save, I don't know, the people from themselves, basically. And we are having these policies in place, and on top of that, we're taxing everybody. So it's something that I don't believe that it will convince not even the member states themselves, but definitely not the people, because we are already paying too much in taxes.
Yeah, and saying that taxes will be paid by companies is also a manipulation, right? Because who's gonna in the end bury the costs? Where do companies take their money from?
If there is one thing in the economic field that is unanimously agreed, is that the taxation eventually is being paid by the consumer, the end user of the product. And you can see it also with many companies that they don't have a major objection, because eventually they will just raise the prices. And this has the double effect of making all the European products less competitive for global competition and export. So yeah, there's plenty of things to say. It's if this happens, it's going to be historical in the sense that the EU is going to have its own resources, its own revenues for the first time in history. But it's completely wrong way to do it, and it just creates additional burdens for the people who are having a hard time, paying the bills.
Exactly. I don't know how to pick up on that. Give me a second.
At some point, we have to say enough is enough. No, let me say this. At some point, we have to say enough is enough, because we have to question. At some point, we have to question, where is all this money going? Because no matter how many times you raise the taxes, the state budgets have huge holes in it. So everything that the politicians have claimed that they're going to solve by raising taxes in Europe, at least, it hasn't been solved. Okay, the basic justification for taxation, which is redistribution of wealth, so helping out those who are poorer than others. The level of inequality has been steadily rising, so it's not working, the redistribution, or it's not working the way they do it.
This is a long, this has not been the reason. I think that in the heads of many, taxes, the reason for taxes is now just solely to fund the running of the state and solving the problem it has to deal with.
But again, I'm not against taxation. Okay, there are very legitimate reasons to fund the state if the state, for example, provides security. Where is the security? We've been talking for years now that the European states do not have the necessary defense capabilities and capacities to safeguard peace and security on the continent, right?
And now we have only time until 2027. This is the time that the Trump administration has given us. Until 2027, leadership of European defense has to go back to Europe.
Exactly. Are we ready for that? No. Where is all that money? Where has it gone? All these years.
In principle, Antonios, I agree with the questions you're asking, but I would like also to remind you that in one of the previous episodes, we already said that the budget of the EU that is discussed for the next perspective is way too low concerning the geopolitical and global challenges and competitiveness challenges we're facing. So my question is, where where should we look for some common sense and solutions? Because this is what we've just been discussing as a proposal. Now we're looking at negotiations with member states, with the council. We're looking also with tensions with probably Washington in this process, with because the taxing will also be something that will be hurting American business presence in the EU. And we still need more money to fund everything that is going to be needed to be funded. So where's the simple logic here, if there is any?
There is a very simple logic. We need to invest heavily on infrastructure, technologies, and social cohesion. The member states do not have the money to invest. We know that. So the money needs to come from the European level. And this means that we have to have joint borrowing on the European level. But this money cannot just be, just shared like this between the member states. We need to have a plan, a European plan on how to how to invest this money in order to produce innovation, economic growth, to generate wealth, that then this wealth will definitely be redistributed across the people, across member states, across the continent. Okay, so we need to create economies of scale. That is the unique, the singular solution for the lack of credit on the European continent. And we also need to create certain conditions for this money to be invested and for the innovation to scale up and so on. But first, we need to have the money, because no matter how much you regulate, you are not generating wealth. And if there is one thing that is true, and even the Chinese are doing this, so not the traditional capitalist liberal societies. You have to spend money, you have to invest money in order to make money. This is the way that China is doing, by the way. They are heavily investing.
So we have two problems, just to wrap it up. We don't have enough money, but the way the Commission is trying to get more money into the pocket is not guaranteeing that the money will be better spent, because we also have a problem with spending money. So
Yeah.
This is not
Thank you for pointing out
uplifting.
the obvious.
This is not an uplifting summary of our episode, but maybe our listeners and viewers will share some more positive perspectives or suggestions where this should go in the comments.
Especially about taxes,
really
man. Especially about taxes. I would love to hear the comments of the audience. I mean, at some point we have to question the very justification and legitimacy of raising even more taxes, unless we see that there is effectiveness in the way that this money is being used and spent and or invested. Okay, why do we take everything for granted so much? I really don't understand that. I would like the audience to chip in the conversation.
Yes, and with this, sorry, I just want to open one thing before I say what I want to say. Where is? Oh yeah, there it is. Okay, and with this, I think we can wrap it up. Antonios, thank you for this very dynamic conversation with no positive conclusions today.
I'm waiting for more comments.
Yes, yes, we do. We are. And I'll see you, I guess, on Friday, the 12th of December in the European Parliament, where we participate in a very interesting event about age verification in the digital single market. And your you're giving a speech there, so it will be very interesting. I think we will post this episode ahead of Friday, so that's why I'm mentioning it.
Great talking to you, Krzysztof. See you soon.
Bye, everyone.